it's a pleasure. I haven't heard that worm story in a long time. I had the pleasure of having lunch in, what was it, Sky Room with your leadership, and we were talking about, you know, my past and everything, and it was really quite interesting. If you go back, we had these really large worms. In the South, where I'm from, we call them night crawlers. They're really big. They're about the size of your little finger. And my wife just deigned to touch this worm. She didn't, and so I offered to help. We really didn't necessarily like each other, but it's funny how that first cut down the worm has, you know, been love ever since. So it's been, I'm probably sure you've never heard that story. But anyway, it's a privilege to be here. We're really fortunate in our program, the Stanford Program at IPS Learning, to have Greg be able to occasionally teach with us. And it's a challenge to find people that are able to balance taking on adults like yourselves, and I'm talking about adult, basically anybody that's passed high school, and actually being able to engage them and share new information and things like that with them. And so I just want to acknowledge we're really fortunate to have Greg, and as he knows, it's quite challenging to find when you have 60 people from around the world in a classroom and they've paid $2,800 for 2.5 days, they're quite demanding on what they expect. So we appreciate having him in that program. I was struggling to say, what wisdom could Greg and I were talking about this. I don't necessarily think of myself as somebody that can impart wisdom. I think the more gray hair I've gotten, the more humble I've become and realize what I don't know. And so I've tried to actually learn how to ask better questions. And what I decided to do was think about looking back through my professional life. So this is not, some of this might be applicable in your own life, but I think especially in a professional life, and whether it's in graduate school, undergraduate, or when you're out in the workforce, wherever that's going to be. And I was trying to think of things where, when I think about leading, is that, let me just tell you a really quick story that makes me think about leading. I got my chops, if you will, in learning how to execute strategy at the Research Triangle Institute in North Carolina. And it's a big research park there called Research Triangle Park. And Research Triangle Institute did applied R&D. So after I got my first master's degree and we moved there, and I went to work for RTI. The very first job I had, I was a team of one. Okay? That was pretty easy. I really didn't have to lead anybody but myself. I had to make sure that I was doing everything right. I didn't have to worry about anyone else. Everything went great. Boss comes in and said, John, you're doing wonderful. 3 months later, have I got a deal for you? We've got a little bit bigger effort. I'm going to let you be lead. We've got somebody here we just hired. Would you mind having this person on your team? Well, I'm puffed up. Boy, this is a good guy. Now I've got a team. I can say I'm a leader. So I had somebody on my team, and we actually worked out pretty good. We did a little adjustment. There's only one other person to have to deal with. Well, you probably see where the story's going. As I got more experience, gradually I had 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 7 people, 40, 50 people. And one of the things that I realized real quickly is if you're going to work with more than one person, parts of you are going to have to exhibit leadership. You may not think of it as leadership, but you better have it because people are looking at you, they're looking at how you spend your time, what you focus on, and things like that. And so as I thought about that and then I looked back over my career, and if you want to call it that, I've been all over. I've met some of you and I said, I could not imagine being a freshman and knowing what I want to do. When I was 18, 20, 21, I really didn't know, and it took me probably another 15 years. So hats off to all of you that know exactly what you want to do, and I really am envious of you for that reason. So what I did was think about, here's a couple of things that I think would be useful to sharing. And before I do that, I want to share a picture with you, okay? This is time for some audience participation. What do you see up there? Just blurt it out real loudly. Upside down map. Anything else? Pardon? Yes?
It's how Australia prints their world map.
Okay, how Australia prints their world map. Okay, anybody else want to add to, okay, be an Australian view, it could be a Southern Hemisphere view, upside down map, any other adjective you would describe this by? Okay, why do we use the word upside? Why is it upside down? Okay, geography, a lot of you have been around the world. Why is this map considered upside down? The south is at the top. And what do you mean by south? Southern hemisphere. Okay. Look over there on the right. What's the shape of this place that we live? What shape is it? It's a sphere. There is no up, down, east, west, north, south are all artifacts of us. The fact that we live in the Western Hemisphere rather than Eastern Hemisphere has nothing to do with science, has everything to do with the British and where Greenwich is, and probably some other factors. And so what I want you to do is keep this map in mind, that as I share things with you, try to look and think about having different perspectives. I show this in almost every class to get people to plant a little seed here that there's different ways of looking at the world. And a lot of times they have to do with your frame of reference, what you're bringing to the table. I think that's really important to understand that, especially when you have larger and larger teams. Those teams are going to have different frames of reference. What's really interesting, when I show this to a room of people that are all from Shanghai, they look at this very differently than if they're all from the UK. And if you look in the US, classically, if you look at a map in the US, which continent is in the middle of the map? Of course, ours, okay? You know, the one. So keep that, I want you to keep that in mind as I go through here. Now here's sort of the 6 things that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to just share with you some stories and tidbits as I go along. I don't think there's any one that's more important than the other, but what I'm trying to reflect on is that as you lead, you learn. Learning doesn't stop when you graduate here. It doesn't stop when you have your master's, your undergraduate, or your PhD. And you hear your faculty, I'm sure, talk about that, but I think in the world that we're in now and the complexity of change and things like that, learning is a constant. And so what I want to share with you is things that I have noticed that really, I think, reinforce this. The first one, I don't know if it was one of the Covey boys that said this, but that first phrase to me is probably one of the best phrases to have in mind in a business organizational setting. Trust is a decision accelerator. Now let's think about this a minute. As you heard, I've been married a few years. And if you think about it, you have a relationship with somebody. If that's a new relationship, you may have, it's not that the person's not trustworthy, but you've not had an experience of, interchanging with them, exchanging ideas with them. Over time, as they make decisions, you make decisions, you interact, basically you build up that trust. It takes a long time to build it up. Does trust, what if I say something that's not true, or I do something that I told you I was going to do and I didn't do it? Does the trust go away? Yeah. Yes. Does it come back quickly? Oh no, big drag, big rock right there. Now, so let's think about this as a business setting. So I'm building up a team, or I'm working with different organizations. That trust initially may be, I'm going to make some key assumptions that I can trust you, that you will deliver, and things like that. If you make a misstep, or I make one, it really, damages that trust environment. It's not somebody set it out to do something distrustful. It's that when someone doesn't do what you expect them to. And so one of the things that I found, and just this is to me just hit the nail on the head, is that if you think about the importance of making decisions quickly, it has a lot to do with money. It takes a long time to make the decision. The organization is spending, whether it's a university or a private business, it's going to cost more. You can make that decision faster when there's an element of trust among the team and all the people that you're going to be working with. So the first thing I would just challenge you to think about when you're on teams, think about your teams that you have here where you collaborate and work on all the great projects you have and how you build up trust in that team over time. You build up trust by doing things, by building up sort of a reserve account. You know that I'm going to do certain things. You know that particular person is really detailed. Come on in, there's some room on the front row. I saw somebody lingering out back. Anyway, okay. Secondly, when you get out in the business, when you leave and you go to work, either start your own business, even more important, if you're starting your own business, somebody's going to be putting up the resources for that. There's going to be an element of trust. So just keep that phrase in mind. And I use it a lot of times. I'm in a meeting where we're talking about a group that we want to establish a relationship with. And I think it's important to reinforce, we need to build up a long-term trusting relationship with that organization. And once we do, the decisions get made just like that, or almost maybe two clicks. Now, you've heard of the slow food movement. My wife says I should adopt it because I probably eat too fast. But if you think about go slow to actually decide fast is what that statement's about. And the go slow has to do with building up that trust over time. So this is not a class about trust, but it's something that I just want to reinforce. I know in the global leadership and other classes you talk about this and the importance of it. I just cannot say enough about this. But in two business calls this week where trust came up. And we were trying to determine what needed to be done in a big workshop, and there was some issues, and it actually had to do with trust, why there were problems. There were all these other problems. We said, now what's really the core root of that? And it was lack of trust among some of the key parties. So just keep that in mind, really good. So first, trust. Now, timing is funny in my career where I've heard somebody say something that I just remember like it was yesterday, and then other things just go out. You know, the calculus class, it came in one ear, went out the other after the lecture was over and I had my exam. If you think about this, timing has a lot to do with the outcome of the rain dance. Now, this may not be actually the best picture of a rain dancer, but let's think about what in the world does that statement mean. It really has to do with timing. You can put together the best business case, best plan, whatever you want to call it. In this case, it might be you have practiced doing a rain dance for months. You've had the elders give you details on doing rain dances. You've watched the most senior and experienced rain dancers do a rain dance. You've practiced. And then the big day comes. The chief comes to you and says, we really need a rain dance. We really need a rain dance. It's late August in central Idaho and it is dry. We need a rain dance. So you put all the regalia, you take all that experience, all that practice, and you go out and you do a rain dance perfectly for 3 hours. Now, the sky's clear. There's no rain in the forecast, and the humidity is 12%. No rain occurs. Did you do a bad rain dance? Did you not do the rain dance right? Did you not have on the right costume? Did you miss some steps? Didn't have anything to do with that. Timing has a lot to do with the outcome of the rain dance. There's a lot of things, if you've not already experienced that in your own lives, you see in business, that the reason things were not successful was not just luck, it was the wrong time, the wrong place. There's a really good example of that if you think about the new iPhone that's coming out. I'm an Apple fan, and so I was reading about the iPhone 5S. It's going to have identity on the little circle. Use your fingerprint. And a few years ago, a Google Android phone had that. I don't know if it was Samsung, maybe that's wrong, came out with the same thing, except it was not well executed. You had to drag your finger over the phone, and half the time it didn't work, and if you didn't hold it just the right way, it wouldn't read. And it was a dud. So in their case, they had technology that appeared to be good, but it didn't have all the pieces and everything lined up together. So if you think about timing having a lot to do with the rain dance, then Apple bought a company that had more advanced technology, figured out how to incorporate that into the new phone that's coming out on Friday. Now, if they had tried to do that 3 or 4 years ago, it might not have been successful because the technology really hadn't gone far enough. So you can think, I can just think of hundreds of examples of this particular thing. It's a good thing to remember when you're, especially if you have a failure sometimes and things don't quite work. Maybe this was one of those times where the timing had a lot to do with the outcome of the rain dance and just wasn't the right time. So keep that in mind. I think that's one first thing about timing. Second, the guy that I think I have a quote in here where this came from. This is not my 3 sets of words about time, but I thought they were pretty cool if you think about how can I put some boundaries around time. And so I just want to share with you a couple of things about it being highly limited in various ways, both short-term and long-term. It's uniquely limited in a particular way we'll talk about, certain things you cannot do with time, and it's equitably limited. And by that we mean across the world. Basically, if you look around the world, most people have about the same amount of time, and I'll talk a little bit about that because there's some ways you can think about that. Okay, as best we know, there's 24 hours, give or take a few seconds in there in a day. And the lifespan, let's think about a developed country, because obviously if we were in an emerging economy or a less developed country, 70, 80 is not, in Russia, I think it's like 45 or 50 for men. Average age or something has actually gone down. But other than that, we actually pretty much have a set of life, things work out, and we have a set of time. Now, the interesting thing is there are ways to have more time. And the one that jumped out at me the most was about 5 or 6 years ago. I heard a guy named David Allen. He lives down near Santa Barbara in Ojai. And he has a whole approach to thinking about time called getting things done, or the GTD method. And it's very applicable to the kind of work that you see in technology places, and where there's a lot of stop and go, start and stop, give and take. And David had this phrase that basically said that focus is a substitute for time. Let me say that one more time. Focus is a substitute for time. So if you're very focused, whether in a business or personal setting, you're going to be able to do things faster, which in effect gives you time. Think about going all the way back to the rain dance. Think about going back to trust. So if I have built up trust with those I work with, those that work for me, I've automatically bought time because I've accelerated the way decisions are made. So it's a different way of thinking about it. It's not just about, oh, here's what I do at 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. But if you put it back in that frame, you can actually create time by being more focused and having a higher level of trust with the people that you work with. It's a different way of thinking about time management. There's lots of ways of doing that. It's a booming industry, as we all know, to do that. So let's keep that in mind. Focus is a substitute for time. Now, the uniquely thing that, let's see, what was the guy's name? Oh, CEO Yusan Wang. He was head of, which one? Reddit, one of the web apps. You can't bank it. In other words, oh, wouldn't it be great? I'm going to go out here and build up about 12 hours on Sunday and that I can use the next Sunday. So I'll have a 36-hour Sunday. Doesn't work that way. Be nice, wouldn't it? Okay, or we want to go out and enjoy the great weather here, so I'm going to bank some hours so that I can come tomorrow and do what I needed to do today so I could be outside. So you can't bank it. You can't transfer it. I can't say, Ian, I have a deal for you. Ian's my oldest son. You want to go mountain biking? I'm going to give you 5 hours so you can go mountain biking and you don't have to work. We hadn't figured out how to do that yet. It's not transferable, at least to our knowledge. And once it's gone, it's gone. So this last 5 minutes are gone. We can't recover them. We can look back on them. We have memories about them. We can share those memories, but we can't actually recover them as a way for doing things. And I thought that was a fairly interesting way to think about time. So uniquely limited. And last, the fact that it's a resource that we all are given some amount of time. It'd be nice if maybe, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be to know in advance what that's going to be. But I've watched, as I've had different members in my families that get older and die, and you think, and it's not being morbid, but you think about, okay, what does time mean? And so if you think about that and making use of that, really important as a leader to think about that so that you're making good use of your own time, kind of thing. Okay. Let's see. This is a class. I'll look over here at the dean. Is it okay to ask people what fungible, who wants to tell me what fungible means? It's not an engineering term.
Can be spent.
Pardon?
Can be spent.
Yeah, okay. Yes, but that's not the total definition. Anybody here have an agriculture background? A commodity background? Okay? Yes, back here. You want to make a stab at it?
It's like a commodity that can be replaced.
Yeah,
Take its spot.
yeah, it's like dollar bills. Think about it. We could all have $100 bills in here. You don't care which one you get. They're fungible. And in a world market, an ounce of copper is an ounce of copper, as long as it has the same grade and same specs. That's what we mean by fungible. People are not fungible. But a lot of businesses treat them as if they are. So what we want to do is be really, really careful that we keep that personal thing in there and think of people. That's why I had people person. It's not thinking about, oh, you're just another cog. You're just another person sitting in the seat. You have unique qualities of who you are, how you show up, what you bring to the table. Really, really important. So remember that people are not fungible. That's actually a pretty easy one to remember. My wife loves to do yoga, and is actually quite good at it and very limber, something that her husband's not. And she brought this book home one day from a yoga teacher that says, how you do anything is how you do everything. It may be some Zen teaching or something back in there. There are no secret corners. How you do anything is how you do everything. Very, very powerful. Now, a lot of you have shared with people, if you've been out on mission and all, just think about that and how you live your life, not just when you're in front of somebody, but maybe when you're back in your apartment or when nobody's looking, kind of thing. That's what this is talking about. Really powerful. Now let's think about that in a business and personal setting, really important. I certainly wished I could aspire to this. I can think of plenty of times where I should have thought about this before I acted. Let me just tell you a little story about this guy. See if you can recognize him right here. Anybody recognize that face there? Steve Jobs. Yeah, this is the paperback version of Walter Isaacson's book. It just came out. I was reading it on the plane. Incidentally, if any of you are interested, I know you're an engineer, if you're interested in business, I would suggest reading this book when you are not having to do your classwork, so that would have to be on a break. It has a lot of insights about businesses and organizations, not to copy this guy, you wouldn't want to do that, but just how things think, really powerful. There's a little story in here. When he was a young kid, his father, they lived in Mountain View and then Palo Alto in California. And his father had a very mechanical bent to his way. He liked to make things and tinker. He wasn't academic in that way, but he had an engineering way of looking at the world. And they had built a fence on the back, a certain kind of fence where it was laced like that. And Steve talked about in this book where his father took him and said, son, I want you to look at this fence. I want you to look at the side that you see from the house. Looks at it. What do you see? Oh, a beautiful fence. He said, okay, come with me. They walked all the way around and went to the back of the fence. He said, Steve, what do you see? He said, I see the fence. I said, what does it look like? He said, it looks just like the front. And he imparted to him a little lesson. He says, you want the front and the back to look the same. And then he had a little bit more story about that it's not about what's seen, it's about your caring about what you do. And so you don't have to see it to not really do it well. Now, next time you look at it in a furniture store, run your hand under the furniture. See if it feels the same as it does on the top. 98% of the time it's rough, it's unfinished. Now, Jobs brought this to this world, right here. Some of you may have these products. And probably the story that we can tell, because we all know he had a colorful language and a temper, and is that when they were doing some of the first runs of the MacBook Airs that were out of the solid casting, he had them take the machine apart. They looked at it, and there was some pieces of solder. The machine still worked. It was fine. It passed all quality inspections. But there were a couple little things like that, and he just blew up. And he said, I want the inside of our machines to be as beautiful and functional and as beautiful in design as the outside. And then added lots of language after that. So that story, he didn't have to send a memo to anybody, was saying how you do anything is how you do everything. Now you can say, think of another way. Let me just ask you, how many of you have an Apple product? Don't want to be too far. Well, a couple of you, okay, or most of you. Okay, does anybody remember what the box looked like? Anybody here done some dime? Yeah, would you mind just tell us real quick, what about the box struck you?
Let's see. The box is the older model of the desktop, right?
Okay, or new, it could be for a phone or an iPod or a machine. I just want you to, what about the box? Yeah, good point. Yes, hey, there's a good use of language. Good catch. I'm talking about the box this came in.
It looks good.
All right, anybody else? Okay, it looks good. What else? Yes, right here.
It wasn't floppy or flimsy, it was durable cardboard.
Right, very durable cardboard. What else? Yes?
It has a finish on it.
has a finish on it. Does anybody in here own a Kindle? Okay. Describe the box it came in. Yeah. Yeah, it was recyclable. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it had already been recycled. Right. Okay. Now, this is not a riff on Amazon. I have actually both of those products. But Apple would spend months getting the box right. The first box for the first iPhone, the lid, those of you who are in design or anything thinking about design, this is really what this guy imbued in that company. So it wasn't, look, if I'm building the best product in the world, I don't put it in a bad box because it's sending a message that I don't care about this. That's how he viewed it. How you do anything is how you do everything. And even if you get a, say a $49 shuffle, the cheapest product like that you can buy, that's going to come in a very nice, well-crafted box. How you do anything is how you do everything. There's one other little apocryphal story about that. The secret corners can apply when you think about teamwork and doing things as a team. And one of the things that, that people at Apple will tell lots of different ways of telling these stories is that there would be the tiniest little bit. There'd be a little piece on, let's say, this little piece here at a hole here. It was slightly, had a little bit of a kerf or whatever you call it left over where it didn't mold right. Most people would never notice that. Jobs would notice that. His eyes would look for things like that. So over time, what the team learned was that was important. And it would carry over in different ways. And in our classes at Stanford last week, including one Greg was teaching, we had several people from Apple. And when you share these kind of stories, they will always be able to share a story with you. Now, here's the challenge. All of us are not going to make a product like this. All right? So we have to think about, okay, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'm making something that's going to be at a different price range. But I could still follow that in that price range and think about making something that's well made. And Tim Cook, who took over from Steve Jobs when Steve died, is the current CEO. And he was interviewed about 6 months ago by Wall Street, somebody from Goldman Sachs, as a matter of fact. You can find this on this audio interview, very interesting. And he was also interviewed at, he happened to go to the same business school I did, the Fuqua School at Duke, and they had him come back and interviewed. And they asked him, what's great about Apple or whatever, everybody's trying to look at the secret sauce. And he said, we only have one purpose, is to make the best possible product. Everything else takes care of itself. Well, the banker from Goldman Sachs couldn't believe it. How could anybody want to make the best possible product? Now, one of your 5 sort of pillars here is around character development, right? And think about that in a real expansive way of making the best. Why would you want to make a cruddy product? Okay, cheap product, right? And so in their case, it's the best possible product. So the guy from Goldman Sachs said, nah, come on, Tim, you're not. And if you listen to him, this happened 3 times. You guys are really trying to make something a lot of people are going to buy. And he said, no. He said, we're going to make the best possible product we can, and then we will offer that to the market. If it sells, that's great. If not, we didn't make the best possible product. So that's a mindset. That's a purpose, an identity, a really strong value set that they have. And I think this sort of captures that in its own way. So what I challenge you to think about is what can you do in your teams to do that? When you go out to work, I absolutely guarantee you're going to be faced with stuff around this. Our little company, same kind of thing. Do we do this or do we do that? And oftentimes people say, well, this one costs 10 cents, this costs 20 cents. Let's do the 10-cent one. Rather than the question is not which one of those do you do, but which one is consistent with our values and the kind of company we want to be. And it could be it's the 10-cent one. It could be you decide you're going to have a product that's just good enough. Okay? So the 10 cents is okay, but you're doing it based on those values. So it's really just a powerful thing to think about. Okay, this last, I think this is the second last, is something that drives me crazy, so I had to put something in here about it. I love Post-its, and I don't own, I'm not a 3M stock, I'm not a salesman for them, But I'd like to encourage you, and I know we walked around and saw a lot of whiteboards and all this morning, is that when you're doing your teamwork and you're doing business work, do as much of that on the wall as you can. And you're going to have a new engineering school here in a little bit, and it's going to have all these great designs that the team's been looking for. And this wall-based processing is really very powerful. And some of you are already doing that because we could see that going on. I just want to reinforce that. And when you get out of school and you're in business settings and all, make sure you're in a company. If not, bring that to them. You don't want people sitting around the classic picture. We're all sitting with our little pads writing notes, yes, 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 rather than up at the wall doing that. It's been proven from research and all that you're going to get a lot better, more creative, innovative results when you're at the wall. We talk about going to the wall, and that's what this is about. And so I just use the term wall-based processing. Second thing here is where are our lean manufacturing? Somebody was telling me that they were doing lean manufacturing. Wasn't it somebody back there in the back or something like, okay. There are a lot of ways in business, different terms that we use for actually going to the floor to see what's going on and understanding that. These are just some of them. This is from the whole Toyota production system, Gemba, farmer's eyes in the field. I think I heard that from somebody from Brazil. Go to the floor is oftentimes used in manufacturing, and managing at eye level is from the Jorgen, I cannot pronounce his last name, I should have asked you, the guy who's CEO of Denmark. In Denmark, they're talking about managing at eye level. You're not up at the CEO office, you're actually down with the people doing the work. So that's what all this is about, go see. Now, you're saying, well, I'm not at that level yet, but if you develop this concept early on, you're going to be a fantastic leader. You need to watch the people that are mentoring you and things like that to learn ways of doing that. You actually go see. Now, if you've ever worked at a McDonald's or a place like that, the manager's embedded with you. If you have a really busy time, the manager's in there, serving the French fries and hot dog, they don't know, hamburgers, stuff like that. You can tell I don't go to McDonald's. You know what they buy at McDonald's, okay? If you go to a really good restaurant or just a so-so restaurant, almost the defining factor is where's the manager? They're not back filling out forms, doing timesheets. They're fully engaged. And if you look at a really nice restaurant, you often see the manager. I know there's a restaurant in Palo Alto called Calafia. The guy that started it used to do all the executive, not executive, but dining rooms at Google. They have free food, really good free food. And he started his own business. And if he's in town, he's there. He's right on the line. He's not cooking the food, but he's there shuffling. If there's a problem, somebody just dropped 100 pounds of ice or something where it shouldn't be, he jumps in the fray. So this is what this is talking about. This whole Gemba is go see. Really, really important. I would have given anything when I was coming out of graduate school if I had really understood this and done this. Now, let me give you a quick story. Ali Mullally, does that name ring a bell for anybody in here? Anybody know Ali Mullally? Alan does. Right. You want to tell the students who he is? What he's doing right now?
He developed the Boeing 777, and he's been the CEO of Ford Motor Company for about the last 10 years.
Right. Everybody hear that? Developed the 777 at Boeing, and then has headed up Ford, I guess it's 05, right? He has a good name, right? So guess what? There's another good book called American Icon, I-C-O-N, not American Idol, American Icon, about his turnaround at Ford. It's the second book that I often suggest. If you want to read a book about business and learn from others, it's a fantastic book. Now, the reason I'm telling you about this is that this guy, he has a PhD, I think, doesn't he? An engineer. He's really just smart. He's called a Boy Scout because when you see him, he's smiling, and everybody says this can't be the real deal, but he is. And he tells a story in the book, the guy that wrote the book. When he got to Ford, he said, gosh, I know about planes, I don't know about cars. So what am I going to do? So he said, one of the things I need to know about as an example, and this is going to apply to you the day you leave school, and it might apply to you now. He says, I can't know everything. The more responsibility I have, I can't know everything. So it's very important that I find people who do, who can work with me or I can learn from. So Mullally, now this is the guy's CEO of Ford Motor Company. He's in there to turn it around. Ford was the only company that didn't ask for bailout money, but they got a loan for $21 billion. They even hawked the Ford Oval. I mean, this was really, if you go back and read in 2005, it was amazing what he did. Really down in the dumps. So Mullally said, I need to understand the design of cars. I understand for planes, I understand manufacturing, supplies, stuff like that, supply chain. So he asked around and said, who's the person that knows the most about designing Fords? They said, oh, I forgot the guy's name. Let's just say it's Joe over in, over in plant, that plant, building 3. So he calls up Joe. You can imagine, here's the new CEO's been in the job a week or two, and you get a call from him. Oh boy, is this one of those you don't have a job calls? And Alan asked him, he said, I understand you know a lot about product design. This is your specialty. He said, yes. He said, here's what I'd like for you to do. I want you to educate me. And I'm going to ask you to put everything together in a big black notebook that you know. You're going to give it to me at the end of the week. I've already talked to your boss. No problem. I have all of your time. In that notebook, I want you to put the things that I would need to know. And they talked a little bit more about it. Then I'm going to have it all weekend. I'm going to study it, and I want you to come in, and we're going to spend a day together, and you're going to give me a tutorial on designing cars. And that's what he did. And he routinely did that across several different parts of Ford that he didn't know as much about. And I tell that story because you're always going to not know everything. I hate to tell you. There's stuff you don't know, but you're going to be in settings where you need to use that same thing at your level. So if you need to know something, find somebody that can hook that up. But in university, you've got professors and graduate students you can call on. When you get out in the work world, it doesn't always work that way. So you have to actually seek people out like that. Now, what does that have to, what he did, not only he did that, he actually went to the floor. He changed where the office was open door. He'd go down and eat with none of this executive dining room, and they were all fully integrated, the workers and the executives. Unheard of in that company. It's totally different. And it has lots of other impacts. So just remember, go to the floor, remember Alan Mullally as an example. Last, learning is I couldn't be in a university and just come from a university and not think about this. I think this is really important to learn how to learn. And a lot of you obviously figured that out because you're here. You've learned, you've got your tricks, and you find out what works for you. Are you more visual? Are you less visual? Do you audio? Do you like to hear? Do you need to write? And I'm always highlighted. And Paula, my wife, said, John, why do you highlight? You never go back and look at them. And I said, what I found, the highlighting helps me remember it. So we have all these books that are highlighted that I've looked at once. And so that works for me. It may not work for you. So a couple of things here about learning how to learn, being cognizant of that. I just mentioned several things that I found very useful for learning and stashing what I learned. One is an app called Evernote. I do not own any stock. The company is not public. Let me just ask a quick question. How many of you use Evernote? Oh, whoa, good. Much higher number than at Stanford last week. This is a really, really neat tool. If any of you are interested, you can have my email. I think it's on the front cover. If you'll send me an email, I run our Center of Excellence for the Stanford Program on executing strategy. And if you're interested, I'll send you my URL links for the notebooks in that space. There's about 2,500 of them. So if you're interested in this, you have to send me an email though. But if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to share that. Second is Quora. Quora has a lot of technical people, all kinds, not just software, but mechanical, product design, materials, you name it, that are on there. And it's a great way to pose, no advertising, anything like that, to pose almost any kind of question. I actually asked how to do a square root without a computer. We were talking about this earlier today on there, and I got some interesting answers. And so that's an interesting thing professionally. It's not to do homework, that kind of thing, but really interesting, just so I'd suggest that. Third, graphic visualization. A lot of you in engineering know the importance of visually seeing what's there, not just what's on the screen, but visual. Just want to reinforce that. And the one that I've already mentioned about wall-based processing, really important. Okay, now, I put this so that when you see it, you can go download. This is an infographic of a book called The First 20 Hours that is a really cool thing of how do you grab a lot of information in a new area fast. Now, we're not talking about getting a master's in chemical engineering, but there may be some specific things you need to know. And they have a really nice structure there. And this is downloadable, so I put it in there so you could go get that if you're interested in that kind of learning quickly for new pieces of information. One last thing here about margin. I ran across this. I never thought about margin this way. if you think about the time that you're having to spend, whether it's in school, learning, lectures, all that kind of thing, having fun, you know, life needs to go on. Maybe you have a family, so you're spending time with your family. You're having to balance that. Maybe you have a job. When I was in graduate school, I had 2 jobs. I had an assistantship. You guys have assistantships here like that? You call it that, where it pays for part of the school?
Sure.
Yeah. So I had an assistantship, and I had 1 son at that time, and so we needed some more money, so I went and got a job at the library in the same university. And about a month after that, the provost, who's some big mucky in the university, I guess the business manager, called me to my office, and I thought I was getting ready to be kicked out. He said, "John, you can't do this. You can't have 2 jobs." I said, "Well, what do you mean? I'm supporting my family." And he said, "Well, the way the rules are, you can only have an assistantship or you can work in the library. You can't have both. It hurts your, your grades and all." Well, I fortunately had all A's, and put the argument back to him. I tell you what, you can take one of them away if I don't have all A's. And so that, of course, kept me studying hard for the next 2 years. But the reason I mentioned that is that importance of having margin. You may not notice it now, but when you get out of work, there's an enormous number of demands that are going to be made on you. They probably already are. And if you throw in family and trying to balance time for yourself, your family, and work, it's quite demanding. And so I think this margin is a good way of thinking about it. You want to have margin. You want to have a little extra in there. It's like slack. And these are just different ways of thinking about that. I think the last one about it doesn't just happen. You have to really plan for it. And it goes all the way back to time. Has a lot to do with the outcome of the rain dance and the other statements about time. So let's wrap this up here and see if there are any questions. And I think we're about in pretty good shape here. So trust. Trust is a decision accelerator. We all now know that. So if it's somebody you don't trust, just watch out. Timing. This had a lot to do, thinking about the time. Time has a lot to do with the outcome of the rain dance. And just keep that in mind. So that means you want to be looking up in the sky, not just working on the rain dance. It's sort of having a macro view. We call it zooming out. People are not fungible. We all treat them individually with love and care and respect and the kind of things that we talk about from a character perspective, but we don't always do in a work setting. How you do anything is how you do everything. This is something that I personally feel like I need to do a lot better. And so I'll just admit that. That's something every time I think about this, I think about, oh, I say all this stuff, but I don't always practice what I say. CCing. Now, the CCing are talking a couple of things about using wall-based processing. I think the most important thing is go to the floor. Go to where the action is. Don't ever get yourself so high and mighty you're sitting up in an office and you're not engaged with the people that you're leading and that are working and understanding the work. Really, really important. And the last, just keep learning. I think that's really important, and finding ways that work for you, whether that's using tools like Evernote or just writing. Some people, there's a great new product called UBeam, U-B-E-A-M. And one of the slides I showed had a picture of the young gal who's starting this company. The product is not out yet. It's basically, don't laugh, wireless recharging. Wireless, you don't set it on anything. And she was not even in electrical engineering or anything. She was actually in a different field in astrophysics and is working on this, has actually got some patents and all. So if you Google UBeam, you'll see about it. And that came from learning. She wasn't even majored in that. It was trying to solve a problem. She was looking at all the chords, just like I have all this. You got all your different chords. And she said, there's got to be a better way. And she started thinking about it and then hooked up with some brain power in addition to hers and has done a great job. So that's probably a good place to stop. Anybody have any questions or better? You have any ideas? We got about 1 minute. We got time for one question, right? Yo, that's right. You guys have 50 minutes. I'm sorry. Right, okay. Anybody have one question? Your hand goes above you. It's like an auction gallery. Okay, well, it's been a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed it. I want to make sure all of you make a difference in the world because it makes a difference to all of us. Thank you.